Advocates is made possible by grants from the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation and Merrill Lynch Pierce Fenner and Smith Incorporated.
If you're a regular viewer, you know that there aren't any commercials here on Channel 2. No one here will ever try to sell you anything other than the very best in programming. But that means we don't have any revenue from advertising, and that's why we have to turn to you, our viewer, and ask for your support for 80% of our operating budget. And let's face it, operating this television station is a very expensive business.
Because we need you. We need your subscription.
Make a pledge of $5, make a pledge of $20, make a pledge of $50. $50 will bring you a lot of things, as you well know. It'll bring you an umbrella.
Whatever you pledge tonight can be paid for on the installment plan. You can use your credit card, MasterCard, or Visa, or you can give a check or money order.
So we want you to do your part. If you haven't done it, now is the time. There are a couple more minutes before we go back to the PBS special.
For a $35 family membership, we have a special premium offer during festival, and here it is.
This Go Anywhere, Do Anything pitcher and cup set is a real family pleaser at the beach or on the table. Made of...
Hey, hold it. Hey, fellas, listen, I think you do a terrific job. I'm wild about a lot of your programs, but if you're going to keep on asking me for my money like this, you might as well have commercials.
Good evening and welcome to The Advocates. I'm Michael Dukakis. We're debating an unusual subject tonight, but it's one that should be of special interest to all of you who are watching us because you're watching public television and many of you listen to public radio. The funding of our non-commercial stations in this country has always been a problem. In the early years, a few viewers and the Ford Foundation in particular contributed to keep the stations going. Educational funds from the federal government helped to buy, as they still do, some of the equipment, but there was no public broadcasting network. The first report of the Carnegie Commission on Public Broadcasting in 1967 recommended that the stations be tied into a national system to be called the Public Broadcasting Service. The Carnegie Commission report also recommended that a central corporation for public broadcasting be established to distribute funds to the stations which produce programs, and that major federal funding be provided for public broadcasting. The system was established, but only recently did federal support reach the $100 million recommended way back there in 1967. In February of this year, the second Carnegie Commission report was issued. It recommended some changes in the management structure of public broadcasting to save some administrative dollars, but it also asked for substantially increased federal funding for public broadcasting, some $590 million a year, or 4.5 times the present level of federal support. And just a few days ago, the House Subcommittee on Communications, chaired by Representative Lionel Van Deerlen of California, came up with its own proposal. It would also provide substantially increased federal funds for programming. The committee recommended a new national program endowment, which would replace the present Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and that endowment would distribute money, but could also produce programs for the system, something which is not possible under the present system. Tonight, we're going to be debating the central principles common to these proposals: that federal funds should make up a substantial proportion, up to half of the total budget for public broadcasting, and that programming decisions be more centralized. Should Congress substantially increase federal funding for public broadcasting? Advocate Roger Fisher says yes.
Public broadcasting is today's town hall. It needs substantially more funds. Our witnesses tonight are two experts in the field: television critic for the Boston Globe, William A. Henry III, and a man who served with both Carnegie Commissions on Public Broadcasting, Eli Evans, president of the Revson Foundation. Our case this evening is simple and direct. As our society grows bigger and more complex, we can no longer exchange our ideas in the village green or in the town hall. Concerns of the elderly, the ethnic groups, the minorities tend to get lost in the shuffle. Commercial broadcasting can provide mass entertainment. It can serve some of our communication needs, but it means most of them unmet, large numbers of them unmet. The profit motive in free enterprise helps a lot, but it can't solve all our problems. Profits do not build public schools, public libraries, public museums, state universities, art galleries, and things of that kind. Without federal funds, public broadcasting will be over. It'll be dead. It'll take an increase in federal funds to make it fulfill its needs. Diversity of funding sources will assure the kind of balance and independence that we need. If each year we can pay some $75 for federal aid to schools, we can pay $2.50 per person for federal aid to federal broadcasting, to public broadcasting. That's what we're talking about. Our children spend more time in television than they do in school. What we're talking about is $2.50 per person in this country for public broadcasting. We can afford it. Thank you.
Advocate William Rusher says no.
There can't be many assignments less inviting at first glance than trying to persuade an audience composed entirely of people who watch television on the public broadcasting system that the federal government should not give more money to PBS. And yet, if you will just think about it a minute, I believe you will agree with these men who say it shouldn't. Mr. William Poorvu, Vice Chairman of Boston Broadcasters Incorporated and a lecturer at Harvard Business School, and Mr. M. Stanton Evans, nationally syndicated columnist and commentator for CBS Radio. I think you will agree because you are, after all, by and large the same people who voted for the scores of propositions and initiatives and amendments all over the country this past year to limit the expenditures of government and reduce the tax burden on everyone. You have certainly seen in recent years the steady invasion by big government of more and more areas of our lives, always accompanied by large amounts of cash, your cash. Tonight, once again, the advocate deals with a proposal for more government spending. The only difference is that this time the money will be spent, or so we are led to believe, on television programs that you and I like. My hope of prevailing this evening depends, therefore, on appealing to your sense of social responsibility. Do you really want people a great deal poorer than yourself to be taxed to furnish you and me with the kind of supposedly high-level entertainment we prefer? Luckily, the days when only tax money could provide decent television are fast drawing to a close. We're on the threshold of new technological advances, such as videocassettes and cable TV, which will make opera and Shakespeare and even the advocates available to everyone who wants them without costing America's taxpayers a nickel. So wait till you hear our side.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll be back to your cases in our debate in a moment, but first a word about tonight's debate, an additional word. One of the more interesting proposals of the Van Deerlen subcommittee was one that would allow public television stations to run commercial advertising to raise money. Under the proposal, the ads wouldn't be allowed to interrupt programs. They would have been, or would be limited to 3% of airtime in 3 restricted blocks a day, and that compares with 12 to 30% of a commercial station's airtime, which is now devoted to commercial messages. I want to emphasize, however, that our witnesses have varying opinions on that subject, and it will not be a part of tonight's debate. Now let's get on with our discussion and our debate. Mr. Fisher, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I call as my first witness one of America's best-read critics of this area, someone who really watches television, as many of us may not as much as others, William A. Henry III. Mr. Henry?
Welcome to the Advocates, Mr. Henry. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Governor.
You've just heard Mr. Rusher say that this is a special program for the elite. Who watches public television, Mr. Henry?
The short answer is everybody. There's a rumor out there to the effect that public television's audience is an elite, a tiny few. In fact, 60% of the country finds a reason to tune in every single month, and the median viewer of public television has a household income of $15,000 or less and a high school education or less. It seems to me that's Joe average.
Is that significantly different from commercial television?
The public television audience is perhaps marginally more affluent, marginally more educated, but both audiences pretty much match up with the national statistical norm. The short version is everybody watches television, both public and commercial, and the people who watch the most public television also turn out to watch the most of Laverne and Shirley and Lou Grant, too.
All right, with the average household watching television 6.5 hours a day, as we're told, do we need any more television, more money for television?
I'm not sure that more television is what we're talking about here. We're talking about more diverse television. In some ways, the 3 networks aren't 3 corporations. They're one giant corporation with 3 divisions. Most of us can't tell the difference between an NBC and an ABC and a CBS program, but we sure can tell the difference in a PBS program.
Well, what does public broadcasting do that the commercial networks do not do?
public affairs, particularly on things that are not hardcore politics, shows like World, which deal with the third world point of view, Nova, dealing with science, and which CBS is going to attempt to imitate later this year. Culture, giving not merely a floor for the BBC and its productions, but for American cultural institutions, American theaters, American dance companies, American symphony orchestras, and they reach not only the people in their own areas, but people who live in parts of the country that don't have comparable institutions.
Now, quickly, why doesn't commercial television do this for us?
Because commercial television is not the entertainment business, it's not the news business, it's the advertising business, as anybody in it will tell you. The job is to get the audience there so you can rent their eyeballs to the advertisers. And there is no interest in how much the program pleases the audience, how intensively they want it or like it. It's only how extensive an audience you can get, how big a crowd you can draw into the tent.
Does public television need more funds?
I think it clearly does.
Why?
Because at the moment it's producing some drama, teeny bits of that, a fair amount of public affairs, and pretty good but limited cultural items. It has to buy from abroad, it has to do things on the cheap, and above all, it has no margin for error. It's not able to make mistakes. The three networks spend an average of $400,000 per pilot to make 140 pilots to come up with maybe 20 series for the fall. That's $56 million on losers. And there is no opportunity for public television to waste 10 cents. We're all human, we're not perfect.
What would happen if all federal funds were taken away from public broadcasting, radio and television?
It would disappear.
Disappear.
Corporations will pay for particular programs that they can put their names on. Individuals will send in when they see programs that they like. Nobody wants to send in money to maintain the satellite interconnect and all of those facilities of the 200 and some odd stations around the country that give every major community its own locally oriented public television
Henry,
station.
excuse me, what is the satellite interconnect?
That's the system by which those 200 odd stations receive their programs. They don't use the telephone system as the commercial networks have done and are likely to continue doing for a little bit.
In other words, it ties the public broadcasting stations around the country together. Thank you.
All these stations. Now, would permitting commercial advertisements on public television end the need for federal funding, as proposed, Mr. Dukakis said, by the Van Deerlen Committee?
No, it seems to me it's a relatively harmless proposal, but harmless mostly because it's so inconsequential. The commercials would have to be grouped together. They couldn't be scattered throughout the programs. There couldn't be very many of them. They'd be only 3% of the day. And because public television attracts a lot of different people, but not too many at any one time, you couldn't charge very much for the commercials. Figure that the public television audience is a fifth of the network audience, and the number of commercials would be a tenth. Well, you're talking about 2% of the rate for a commercial on a commercial network. That's not very much money.
Gentlemen, let me interrupt at this point. Mr. Rusher, you have some questions, I'm sure, for Mr. Henry.
Mr. Henry, you say that 60% of television households watch public television at least once a month.
That's the cumulative figure according to the latest
What
study.
would the figure
yes.
be if you excluded Sesame Street?
It would be somewhat smaller, but it seems to...
How much smaller?
It's not absolutely clear, but probably 35 to 40%.
35 to
and the
40%.
people who watch only Sesame Street include a very large percentage of those who are in low-income households, low-education households, and it's shows like Sesame Street that give the next generation a chance to break out of that
In
syndrome.
point of fact, if Sesame Street isn't included in the figures, not only would 35 to 40% of public television's once-a-month attention of the public disappear. I can give you figures, we'll hear some testimony later, be near 50%, but also most of its claim to have much viewership in the black and blue-collar segments of the society, because that's where it is in the Sesame Street category. Is that right?
At this point, yes.
Would you agree with
more government money? There will certainly be more and similar programming for children.
Would you agree?
Right now, corporations want to program only to children when they can advertise cereals and toys to them.
Would you agree with the statement that in practice...
And public television won't take cereal and toy money.
Are you through?
Yes, Mr. Rusher. I studied your technique, and I'm doing my best to follow it.
Mr. Rusher.
Would you agree with the statement that in practice, public television seeks public money without accountability?
No, I don't think so.
Why did you make it then? I've been studying you. I'm quoting you, Mr. Henry.
No, I
think
I think there are individuals in public television.
Now, that's not what it said. What it says is the vision sounds elitist, and in practice, it, meaning public television, seeks public money without accountability. This is one of your own columns.
I think that is an incorrect excerpt of what I've said.
Well, then I'll give you the entire column. Suppose you tell us what is correct about it. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Do you want to ask me a question while I look
Certainly.
at
I asked you whether or not you agree that in practice, public television seeks public money without accountability, which is what you said in your own column. You don't agree with it.
No, I don't agree with that.
All right,
I do think there are individuals in public television who think that they should be secluded foundations. I don't.
I'm sure
I think public television, as part of getting more money, should have a mandate to donate or devote a specific amount of its airtime to the elderly, to children, to ethnic minorities. I think we're entitled, in exchange for public money, to get particular commitments to the public.
Do you wish you had agreed at that time with what you're saying now?
I don't think that there is a distinction.
You don't see a distinction between individuals seeking public money without accountability and an entire public television, do you?
No, I don't.
All right. Perhaps you don't. I think some of us do. Tell me, what public affairs program of a political type on public broadcasting would you say it can point to with pride?
I certainly enjoyed the Real America, the Ben Wattenberg show. I disagreed with a great deal of it, but I thought that he had a good deal to say that doesn't otherwise get said not only in public television, but in commercial television.
How about the one in which the narrator described Castro as a man who would not only change the course of Cuban history, but fire the imagination of the world?
I think that's a fair estimation. Stalin and Mao Zedong did the same.
And you're a part of the world. Did he fire yours?
He certainly made me, shall we say, fantasize about missiles landing over my house. That's firing my imagination.
Would it be fair to say that before asking more money, public broadcasting should do a better job with the money it has? You know, it has been said that its office was on the sweeping 6th floor of a building in the Mussolini monumental New L'Enfant Plaza in Washington. You know who said that, don't you?
I'm not sure that I do.
You did. Another one of those. You should read your columns more often.
I write 8 of them a week. I can't always appreciate when a clever phrase is my own.
Another clever phrase, and that's particular.
Could I come back to your question?
No, let me.
What I said was, no one but the system's own employees lobbies for quality television for an artistic vision that ignores ratings and special interests.
Let me read you
this.
this.
That vision sounds elitist, and in practice it seeks public money without accountability.
Seeks public money without accountability.
That some employees in the public television system want to do only
Allow
high
me one
art.
more question.
I don't believe in high art.
Allow
I believe
me one
in
more
serving the
question.
people whom the commercial system that you endorse leaves unserved.
Mr. Henry, let's let Mr. Rusher ask one additional
Please
question.
do.
Thank you.
This
Mr.
was
Dukakis.
one of his questions.
Yes. Mr. Henry, pursuing another one of your points in another column, President, do you believe that President Grossman of Public Broadcasting Service deserves $100,000 as a salary for heading a service that is funded by the taxpayer?
I wonder if the President of the United States deserves $200,000. I don't, but I also don't think that United States senators and congressmen and their staff people should be paid what they're paid. I think they should all have a salary closer to the average wage.
Where Mr. Grossman isn't. Isn't that a distinction? They have, in other words, public money with accountability, exactly what I was talking about in the paper in your hand.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry I have to interrupt. Let's go back to Mr. Fisher now for an additional question or two. Mr. Fisher.
As a student of public broadcasting, do you believe that the 200 and odd television and the other public radio stations are in fact responsive to public interest and perform ably in that role?
Every single one of them is run by a local board made up of local people. The majority of them, in fact, are part of school systems. And school systems, as we all know, receive public funds and are entirely publicly accountable. I don't know that there's anybody more accountable than a school board.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Henry, thank you very much for being with us. All right, let's turn to Mr. Rusher now, who has his first witness for us. Mr. Rusher?
Calls my first witness, Mr. William Poorvu.
Welcome to the Advocates, Mr. Poorvu. Nice to have you
Poorvu
with
is,
us.
as I said, the vice chairman of Boston Broadcasting Incorporated and a lecturer at Harvard Business School. Mr. Poorvu, why shouldn't public broadcasting get the quadrupled and more federal funding that it wants?
Well, I think PBS is doing a very good job of serving a very small segment of the overall audience.
How small a segment?
Oh, runs 2 to 5%, normally closer to 2%. I'm not sure that a substantial amount of funding is necessary to serve that audience. And as a matter of fact, I think if they get this substantial amount of money, it would force a basic restructuring of the whole public broadcasting system, and I don't think that's a very good idea.
Would it change the programming?
I think it probably would in many ways.
But what about commercial broadcasting in which you're involved? The accusation is that it zeroes in on mass markets and doesn't do much with quality shows.
Oh, there are many commercial broadcasters who do local programming. We do programming in the health area, and the religious area, and arts areas. As a matter of fact, they get very good audiences. We did something last week, This Was America, which used still photographs to show a segment of American history, and this show not only won its time period over other network shows, but I think it got a much higher rating than any show on PBS all year.
What about nationally?
Well, nationally, a lot of the networks are beginning to do more. Roots, Eleanor and Franklin, 60 Minutes, Edward the King. There are programs that are being done at the national level and will be done increasingly so.
What about the impact of new technology? Will that have any further effect?
Oh, I think it's going to encourage all local broadcasters to do more programming. There's going to be more diverse outlets as we get pay cable, as we get video cassettes, easier forms of transmission. The viewer is going to have more options, and the broadcaster to survive is going to have to develop more forms of programs.
It'll be simply a matter of commercial survival to give variety.
That's correct.
And diversity. Would more money, though, in the case of public broadcasting, wouldn't it guarantee better programming, or would it?
I think if you look at some of the more popular, more informative PBS programs already, you see Julia Child, Jim Crockett's Victory Garden, The Lasso Crusoe, This Old House. These aren't high-budget shows.
So that high budgeting is not necessary to public broadcasting quality. Is that your point?
That's correct. Not only that, but I think that if you increase the budgets, you may get less diversity. What you may end up doing is getting more blockbusters, more centralized control of the broadcasting.
And what do you mean by a blockbuster, Mr. Poorvu?
Oh, I'd say programs such as Scarlet Letter, where you're spending $3 million to produce one program.
A technical question. We use this term public broadcasting, but what actually owns the top 10, say, so-called public TV stations?
Well, major markets are primarily owned by private, non-profit entities.
Not by the public and not by government, but by private, non-profit entities.
In most of the major markets.
So that the term public broadcasting is in that sense something of a misnomer.
Yes.
It is private, non-profit broadcasting, although the employees make salaries just like the commercial network employees, I presume. Is that correct? They're just no stockholders.
Yes.
That's the point. Tell me, lastly, in your opinion, can public television, if it has really good programs to offer, get non-governmental funding for those programs?
Well, I think they've proven in the past that they have been able to get this funding.
And in point of fact, you expect they could continue to on a sufficient basis and in sufficient quantity in the future?
I would hope so.
I thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Poorvu, let's turn to Mr. Fisher, who has some searching questions, I'm sure, for you. Mr. Fisher?
Let's try and understand. You come first from a very nice commercial station here in Boston. I want to congratulate Mr. Rusher on picking a man from a single station that has more public affairs than any other commercial station in the country. Am I right on that?
I think we are.
More local origination programs than any other station in the country?
Yes, we do.
But that's fine. Now, and you're not very typical of commercial broadcasting, are you? If you're the single commercial station in the country that's the best, you're not very typical.
I think you're getting into a semantics question. I think there are many broadcasters who are doing local programming, and I think there are many more that are beginning to realize how important it is.
Now let's talk about government money for public broadcasting. The commercial stations have the frequency licensed to them exclusively by the government for free, don't they? As each commercial station has a free use to make money out of that channel. Is that right?
There is some fee for it, but...
What's the fee? How much did you pay for your license, more or less? Very little. Legal fees to get it, but beyond that, how much?
It amounted to millions of dollars.
How much would you sell it for now? A license. 100 million would you sell it for?
A concept I have not considered.
No, you would not sell it for 100 million. You have, when we give the private profit makers a chance to graze in public lands, we charge them for it. When you give them the chance to make money out of the airways, you get it for free. Now you essentially, each commercial broadcaster has a free use on which they make a gross profit on $8 billion of revenue, more or less of $2 billion, something like that.
And they pay several $1 billion to the government in taxes. The government makes a great deal of money from the commercial TV broadcasters, whereas PBS
you end up with a higher profit on using this government channel. You would say 25% compared to supermarkets that on gross compare 1 or 2% on gross, something like that. All the top 500 corporations make 5% on gross, and you make 25% on gross, roughly. Now, and you would sell a channel that you have free. The public could charge you for that several $1 million a year. Public commercial broadcasting, you'd still take it and make money, wouldn't you, on the commercial channel?
Well, it would depend on what we would be doing then. We'd be running different kinds of stations, and I don't think we'd be performing the kind of local services that we do perform and do the kind of local programming.
You agree there are local services to be performed?
That is correct.
Such as health programs, public service programs, public affairs, things of that kind?
Yes, I think broadcasters should be doing this kind of program.
Should they be doing more than they are doing?
Oh, that's always a definition of terms. I suppose we always should be trying to do more and better.
Should most other stations be trying to do as much as your station is trying to do?
Well, different markets have different sets of problems.
And why don't they do more?
I think they're perhaps being short-sighted. I think if they did more, I think that this would be something that they would find, as we did, that it not only draws an audience, but involves the community in their station and can be profitable as well.
It's fair to say the reason they don't is because they want to make money, isn't it?
No, I think that's...
Isn't that why they don't do more? Because it's a profit organization. The board of directors of a commercial broadcaster is trying to make money.
I would make an argument that if they did more local programming and they paid more attention, they perhaps would make even more money.
All right, if you agree there are some needs of this kind, small audiences, Chicano-speaking audiences, blacks, the elderly, people who don't buy much toothpaste proportionately, don't buy the automobiles, that need service programming, somebody should meet that. Why shouldn't it be public television meet that?
Well, I think we all should be meeting it. As an example, you talk about Spanish programming. In many communities, the large markets, there are UHF stations that are specifically broadcasting in Spanish. They can provide the kind of service to a Spanish community that PBS can't do, because obviously you can only have occasional programs in Spanish, in the same way that we as a commercial broadcaster have occasional programs that are also in Spanish.
You believe there should be public stations, the kind we have here tonight, to supplement the commercial stations?
I think that a diversity of program source is a good idea.
Great. And do you think we could survive without any federal funding?
Well, you'd probably be a different entity. I think that you'd perhaps be more locally minded than you would worrying about sort of a national network. It would be a different operation. Whether it would be better or worse, I'm not quite sure.
You think that we could do better programs on less money, whereas you spend an average of, 8 times per hour commercial broadcasting than public television?
Oh, no, we don't have your budgets for local programs.
No, nationally. Nationally, commercial television. The Advocates, for example, we can do 10 weeks on what 1 hour, average hour of primetime commercial broadcasting is costing.
A brief response, Mr. Poorvu, and then
is that right?
I wish I had your budget for one of our programs, too.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Mr. Poorvu, thank you for being here.
My second witness, I call Mr. M. Stanton Evans.
Mr. Rusher, before you begin, let me just say a word to our viewing audience, because some of them may have joined us late, and for those of you who have, our question tonight is, should Congress substantially increase federal funding for public broadcasting? Advocate Roger Fisher has presented his first witness, William Henry III, who is a television critic and who has argued that public broadcasting is a good thing, that it provides diversity and special programming for many groups in our society that don't get the kind of programming that Mr. Henry suggests they should on commercial television. On the other hand, Mr. Rusher has presented his first witness, Mr. William Poorvu, who is in commercial broadcasting, and Mr. Poorvu has argued that public broadcasting has a limited audience, that it doesn't need these vast sums of money, and that commercial television can provide the kind of diversity and difference in variety which our viewing population needs. Now let's go to Mr. Rusher, who has his second witness. Mr. Evans, it's nice to have you.
Mr. Stanton Evans, who is my witness, is to be distinguished from and not confused with, at least Mr. Eli Evans, is that correct, who is going to be the second witness for the other side.
All right,
Mr. Evans, this Mr. Evans is a nationally syndicated columnist and a commentator on CBS Radio's Spectrum. Mr. Evans, what's wrong with the basic idea of government funding for broadcasting?
Well, I think that there are inherent doctrinal and practical problems in having government-funded broadcasting that create a kind of insoluble dilemma, a sort of impossible situation that you can't escape from. Either on the one hand, you have an insulated, self-perpetuating set of ideologues doing as they will with taxpayers' money to pursue their own interests without public accountability. Or on the other hand, you have the political arm that extends the money, exercising control over the way in which the programming occurs. You've got to have one or the other of those situations. It seems to me that both are unacceptable. We have had both. Under the existing public broadcast setup, we continue to have both to some degree. And I think both are not only philosophically offensive, but in my opinion are in violation of the First Amendment.
Can you give me examples of these?
Well, in the first category, you yourself in your questioning of Mr. Henry referred to an example, a program on sports in Cuba, which on my evaluation was virtually an hour-long commercial for communist Cuba, which proves there are commercials on public television, and another one in that same series about North Korea, which was virtually the same. I found both of those programs offensive. I bitterly resent having my tax money used to disseminate that kind of programming against my will to the viewing public. On the other hand, you have the difficulty that occurs when political people step in to try to correct the situation. The Carnegie Commission talks about this. Many other people have talked about it. The effort of the Nixon administration to restore what it thought was, quote, balance, unquote, to public broadcasting. And while I sympathize with the impulse that the Nixon regime felt because of the imbalance, I think there is a real danger in that kind of initiative of having political control of a journalistic and artistic entity.
But what about the need, so often talked about, for diversity in programming, some alternative to the alleged mass audience approach of the commercial networks?
Well, I think the answer to that problem is not more government in broadcasting, but less. The reason we have the kind of structure we have in commercial broadcasting today is because of the regulatory policies of the Federal Communications Commission, which since 1966, it's been loosening up in the last few years, imposed a powerful impediment to the development of cable. Cable was barred from the 100 largest markets from 1966 to 1972 to protect the existing network setup and the vested interests that are involved in that. So that what you need, I think, is to free up, diversify the broadcasting situation authentically by getting government out of the roadbed and letting people through pay cable pay for the broadcast that they want to get.
But now, in the case of pay cable and so on, what about people who cannot afford pay cable television?
Well, we had a rather glancing allusion to the demographics of public broadcasting earlier. I would, looking at those same figures, which I have done with some care, those figures show, the commercial Corporation for Public Broadcasting's own statistics show that 72% of the viewers of public television have household incomes of $10,000 a year or more. There's no question, both on the common sense reading and on the statistical reading, that the tilt is toward higher income audiences in public broadcasting, which means you have a regressive transaction here because you are taxing people who are relatively poor to provide entertainment and instruction to people who are relatively well-to-do.
What about the statement we hear that the BBC is a good example of a way to truly independent and yet publicly funded television? Our time is short.
BBC is a very good example of the problem I'm talking about. In the 1930s, Prior to the outbreak of World War II, Winston Churchill attempted to speak out against the policy of appeasement in Great Britain. He was prevented from getting access to the British public through BBC. That occurred also when he tried to speak on Indian policy on another occasion. And there are problems right now with BBC, with voices in the Parliament, the Labour Party speaking out to politicize BBC. Once again, this has happened in other countries such as France and Sweden. It's an inherent danger of government-funded broadcasting.
Mr. Russell, we'll be back to you for some additional questions. I'm sure most of our audience knows this, but the BBC, of course, is the British Broadcasting Corporation, Mr.
Correct.
Evans, which is government-owned and funded.
That is correct.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, let's see where we disagree. I think we disagree on two questions. One is on the appropriateness of using taxpayer dollars for programs like the advocates, like public television, whatever it might be. And then the question of whether we can insulate it from governmental control. Is that a fair statement of the differences in position?
Well, I will provisionally say yes.
All right. Now, as to appropriateness of using taxpayers' monies to support views with which taxpayers disagree, how do you feel about the public library buying books with your tax dollars with which you disagree?
Well, the difference between a public library and broadcasting is one of how you balance. If you want balance in a public library, and I think you should have balance in a public library, don't you?
Yes,
but
indeed.
you can balance it by simply adding books, so you have a full spectrum of available reading material. In broadcasting, you have a limited time frame where ordinarily to add one thing means taking something else off, and that is a judgmental decision which has to be made by some political authority, and that's where the danger enters in, the politicizing of journalism and artistic enterprise through government funding, which necessarily involves the political decision.
You don't mind buying the books you disagree with as long as they're balanced, as long as there's something else by someone's judgment. A public library can't buy the 40,000 titles published every year. They must make selection, too.
There is a judgment. There is an inherent problem in libraries that you have to have some kind of monitoring to see that there is balance.
And you wouldn't throw away the public library because that's difficult, would you?
Well, I'm not saying to throw away the public library. I'm saying the same problem, in principle, the same problem does exist, but the solution is much simpler in the case of the library.
How about state universities? How about Faneuil Hall, from which this program used to be broadcast, supported by taxpayers' money?
The same problem exists. I was a newspaper editor in a state capital for 15 years. There was nothing but political fighting over what went on at that state university all the time.
And we did not quit. We would not give up the public parks because who speaks in there. We would not give up public libraries, not give up public schools, not give up
But you're ignoring
the
intrinsic problem, which is wherever you have public funding, you have public control. Now, what the public broadcasting people are advocating, what your side is advocating, is that we have, in essence, some way to evade this dilemma, that either
public
we can
trustees.
have...
We're suggesting essentially the formula we now have. 280 public stations with independent boards.
Okay, but where is the accountability in that? So where's your accountability? I'm a taxpayer. How do you justify to me what will be done by those trustees with my tax?
At the end of the year, at the end of 3 years, Congress can look and see how well the trustees have performed their duty. They don't come down and pick out each book out of the public library. They can change the board. Now,
but there have to be guidelines by which they decide whether they've done their duty. How do you know they've done their duty? What criteria would you use to decide that the trustees have done their duty?
I would say the trustees ought to do that. Communications
if it is unbalanced to one political point of view, have they done their duty?
Mr. Evans has asked a question. Mr. Fisher, I guess you're going to respond.
I was going to say
that
the public duty we see is to do those things which people motivated solely by profit in commercial television to maximize their profits don't do.
That's totally negative. What should they do?
They should communicate public service, citizenship participation. Programs like this should be available and funded.
This is a balanced program.
I think it's
reasonably balanced. What about a program
balanced?
that is an hour-long commercial for Fidel Castro's sports program? Is that doing their duty with my tax money,
I
your
believe
tax
that
money?
over the year, the world program on Cuba, other points of view, helps the United States understand better how other people see things. Yes, I do. Now, the fact that you disagree with all sorts of people, Mr. Evans, I'm asking who would you have decide?
No, what I disagree with, I don't disagree with them having that opinion. I disagree with making me pay for it with my tax money. Why should I pay my tax money to put Fidel Castro's propaganda on American television?
If his books are in the public library, if Karl Marx is in Widener Library, do you want to stop paying?
But I'm also in the public library. I'm not on public television except in an adversary condition.
On the contrary, you have more television time than you could possibly expect to get. You're on commercial television and public television.
No, I'm not.
CBS radio, excuse me, commercial radio.
And it's sustaining.
All right, now on...
No commercials.
No commercials. In terms of ways of protecting it, federal dollars an average of $75 per person in the United States, federal tax revenue goes to support education, primary, secondary, and higher education. Do you think the federal government controls our educational system too much?
As a matter of fact, I do.
I thought so.
Now, if you'll examine, where do you think all this busing comes from? That is coming right out of Washington, D.C. It's coming out of HEW and the leverage of the federal dollars that are used against the local school districts. There is tremendous federal control over our school systems today with a small minority of federal funding. You're talking about something that's going to be heavily funded by the federal government. It will definitely mean
funding of public broadcasting would be the equivalent of $2.50 per person compared to federal funding of education, which is $75 per person.
Fisher, we're going to have one more
For the
response.
total budget, the federal funding of public broadcasting will be much bigger than proportionally the federal funding is of the public schools. And they're controlling the public schools.
All public schools.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry I have to interrupt at this point. We're going to go back to Mr. Rusher for another question.
Evans, you mentioned that you don't like your tax money being used for particular propaganda films, say, on public broadcasting, and I can understand that, but is that any different from the argument we sometimes hear that, well, everybody's tax money is used for things we don't like, either for the Vietnam War, for welfare, or something like that? How do you justify a particular complaint in this case?
Well, it's very different because the different nature of the enterprise involved. If I don't like what is being done with my tax money in other ways, and I must say there are many other ways that I don't like my tax money's utilization, I have political redress. I can lobby my congressman, I can take political action in some way to demand political impediments being placed in the way of this utilization of my money. If that same kind of protest or activity occurs in the case of journalism or artistic expression, as it would in the case of public broadcasting, that puts us in the constitutional dilemma that I talked about before. We then run into the First Amendment, and you've got government interference with expression.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry I have to interrupt. Mr. Evans, thank you for being with us. Now, Mr. Fisher has his own Mr. Evans, as I understand it. Mr. Fisher,
yes,
your next
you.
witness.
Our second witness has the unique distinction of having served with both Carnegie Commissions, one in '67 and one in now. He is the president of the Revson Foundation, Eli Evans. But Eli, you take the seat.
Welcome to the Advocates. Nice to have you with us.
Excuse me. As a student, had an unusual chance to study public broadcasting. How's it doing? What's it been doing the last 10 years?
Well, I think what we've seen in the last 10 years is the growth of an extraordinary force in American life, a force for education, a force for instruction, a force for enlightenment. It's quite an amazing story, really. To contrast with the BBC story in England, the English started a public system in 1920 and really didn't introduce a commercial system, broadcasting system into Britain until about 10 years ago. We did the opposite in this country. We turned our total broadcasting entity over to commercial interests. It became entrenched, it became pervasive. It's really been only in the last 10 years that we've really built a viable, effective public system in this country.
Now, can public broadcasting function without federal money?
I think it would be difficult, and we would see a very barren kind of medium. What people don't understand is that broadcasting is an expensive business. We mentioned today that the Scarlet Letter, for instance, cost $500,000 an hour to produce. People complain about British programming, but the reason there's so much British programming, one reason there's so much British programming on public broadcasting, is that you can buy that programming for $20,000 an hour. You contrast that with the $400,000 that it costs to make costume drama. You can see why it's so economical, really, to put more foreign broadcasting on public television than we really have been able to produce with American artists. And that's a tragedy, really, because there is such a rich resource in American artists in this country who really want to produce, who want to create. And we've got to be able to support them, and the only way to do it really is to get a sizable amount more money going into public broadcasting.
Or let's deal with the question that the other Mr. Evans he and I were discussing, which is how we can insulate. Can we receive federal funds without having federal censorship? Can we get government money without having it sound like Radio Moscow or whatever it be, Radio Washington?
I think this question, which was really a question which plagued both Carnegie Commissions, both in '67 and the one that just made its report, has been one that will be with us throughout the history of having any kind of public enterprise in this country. It is always a struggle to maintain the independence of private institutions, and incidentally, most public broadcasting stations are privately run by lay boards. It is always a struggle to retain that kind of freedom. The question then is, if it does take more money to produce quality broadcasting, $150,000 an hour for a major documentary, if it does take that kind of money to produce it, how do you structure the receiving of that money in order to keep it free, in order to keep it flexible, in order to provide a home for creative artists to do their work? That's the struggle for public broadcasting. It is the same struggle that Harvard University has receiving federal funds. It is the same struggle that the public schools have in terms of the freedom of the teacher in the classroom. That artist, that programming is going to be a continuing struggle, and we have tried in the Carnegie Commission reports, both of them, to structure a system whereby, a unique American system, whereby trustees will help protect the system from undue political interference.
And it's your conviction it can be done, as it is in state universities, public libraries, and private universities?
It's a struggle. It's a constant battle. The battles over academic freedom, the battles over government interference are a constant one, but it's one that can be done in this country and must be done if we're to have private institutions with some public support.
And if we win that battle, what kind of television might we have on public broadcasting?
Well, it's difficult because in the last 10 years, we've seen such an extraordinary, so many extraordinary flickers of real greatness. The Public Broadcasting Laboratory in 1969 was the precursor of the Magazine of the Air, 60 Minutes, first Tuesday that the commercial system adopted. Sesame Street was the first program really that lifted the vision of parents to see just what television could really achieve. That's an extraordinary American achievement. By bringing the miniseries from Britain in, we introduced to commercial broadcasting the very idea of a series of just 5 programs, the novel for television, which has been emulated in commercial broadcasting. In that sense, I think I see public broadcasting, and the Commission did too, as a pioneer, as an innovator, that can show the rest of the broadcasting system what can be done, and that public interest and innovation will continue to change over time as public broadcasting continues to be an experimenter to bring new kinds of broadcasting into the home.
Mr. Evans, let's turn to Mr. Rusher now, who has some good searching questions for you. Rusher?
A couple of primitive ones first. So simple, I think they're almost primitive. Who shall decide what the public needs in television?
Well, I think the answer to that is that all we can do is hold out a vision of a kind of education, of the marketplace of ideas, of the importance of public citizenship, of knowledge about public affairs and public events, of the importance of culture generally, not just to the rich but to everyone, and hope that we can sort of bring into the American home that kind of vision.
That's a lovely vision, Mr. Evans, but answer the question. Who shall decide what the public gets in television?
I don't understand the thrust of the question, really. Are you
asking there's
whether
going to be in the United States, presumably television, its nature is going to be determined by someone, what it programs. Who decides?
Well, the broadcasters who run these stations have to decide what kind of programming their local community needs.
They decide what it needs.
The local community, which is licensed to that local community in this country, with its lay membership on its board, and the professional broadcasters who run that stations, don't decide what it needs. They decide with a kind of understanding of their communities, the kind of broadcasting that they believe their community needs.
Some kind of osmotic process is going on in which the public desire, assuming there is a public desire. I think
Russia, could you translate that word for those of us
oozing through,
I
would say would do it. Some kind of process by which the broadcasters figure out
what the
public needs or what the public wants.
No, the broadcasters really do try through what they call ascertainment, which means a kind of polling mechanism with the viewers in their area, what it is the public wants.
Wants or needs?
What it is the public wants. And often that question is determined by what the public is seeing. I don't know that if you took a person who had never really seen television at all and asked him what he wanted to see, whether there would be necessarily a demand for it.
I hate to lead the witness, particularly one from the other side, but is it possible that we could say that the public would have something to say about what the public needs?
Yes.
And in a democracy, what is the normal way of ascertaining the public will?
Well, I don't know where you're leading me with this.
I know you don't.
but people vote.
People vote. As Mr. Evans said, there's a dilemma involved. I think it's a very real dilemma. You said it's a constant struggle. Yeah. That was your phrase for it. Either we are going to have, in a democratic society, a political determination of the content of our programming in one way or another, or we have some form of group determination which is necessarily more elitist than a broad public determination. This is the dilemma, and I don't much care where you turn out on it. I just want to find out which...
I recognize the dilemma,
you can make it go
and
away.
I think that it is going to be an ongoing dilemma for any system that is funded by public funds.
Another primitive question. You say funded by public funds. Where do these public funds come from?
They're tax dollars.
Tax dollars.
Voted by
And they come from where?
Well, let me just sort of spell that out a little bit. You know, this system is not funded totally by federal funds.
Don't take too long at it. I'm asking about the federal funds, where they
come from. I know, but
from.
only a third of that money comes from federal sources. The rest come from private dollars contributed by individuals, corporations, and foundations, as well as from state governments and local governments.
Your proposal, Mr. Evans, is for $590 million, over $500 million a year, to be provided by the federal government from tax monies taken from, let's say it.
But triggered,
Shall we?
But triggered
Can
by...
we get the word out
Yes.
from the people of the United States,
Yes.
right? All of them.
Yes.
Whether they watch television or your kind or mine or not. That's all I wanted to
Yes, but that
establish.
money is to be triggered, Mr. Usher, according to the Carnegie proposals, by the amount of money that is raised in the local community.
Before it is triggered, wouldn't it be a good idea for the public broadcasting system to do a better job with the money it has? Your fast-writing colleague, Mr. Henry, in one of his 8-a-week columns, wrote that the General Accounting Office had found waste, mismanagement, and slipshod bookkeeping practices in public broadcasting. Should something be done about that before we pour another $590 million down the same hole?
Yes, I think so.
You think so? Yes, so do I.
I don't defend mismanagement on the part of public
I don't think you would. I take it there will be less British programming on the public broadcasting system, as you see. No more upstairs, downstairs. Huh?
Well, hopefully, if we can have original American drama, we can sell some of those programs to the British and get some money back
Joe
from it.
Papp will do the Shakespeare hereafter.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily Joe.
No, maybe it'll be the School of the Arts down in North Carolina, where I come from.
Did the Carnegie Commission...
One last question, Mr. Rusher,
Did
please.
the Carnegie Commission believe, I take it did not, that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting had successfully resisted Mr. Nixon's inroads? As a matter of fact, on page 49 of your report, you say, we observed that the board took action to downplay public affairs programming in order to avoid placing the entire federal appropriation in jeopardy, and we just heard from Mr. Fisher that it is essentially the same formula that he proposes to use for the future.
A brief response, please, Mr. Evans.
Well, I think the Nixon incidents and the efforts of the Nixon administration, not just to get public affairs broadcasting off the air, but to manipulate and exploit the medium in their own behalf is one of the tragic stories of this decade. It is one of the tragic stories of this decade.
And will it happen again?
It will not happen if there are diversified sources of funding, which I think is the very
centerpiece. If you use essentially
centerpiece.
The same formula that Mr. Fisher said you were asking.
The centerpiece of the Carnegie proposals, which is a mixed formula of funding from many different sources.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry I have to interrupt.
There's strength in that diversity.
Thank you for being with us. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Let's go to our closing arguments. Mr. Fisher, you have 1 minute.
We in this country have more to offer each other than police shows and professional football. In our entire history, no tax dollars have been spent more wisely than those we spent on public libraries, public schools, public museums, state universities, town halls, and the village green. Like these institutions, broadcasting inspires us, sometimes bores us, brings us together, lets us hear the best that each can offer each other. It helps us govern ourselves as best we can. 10 years ago, with such purposes in mind, some of us who are here tonight started the Advocates. During those 10 years, it was off the air for 3 years because of lack of funds. Today, even though the Advocates is produced at a 10 weeks program for the cost of one on commercial television in prime time, we still desperately need money, federal money. All we're talking about is $2.50 per person in this country for a year of public broadcasting across the country. Certainly it's worth that just to hear Bill Rusher alone. Now, if you agree with me, write us and say, yes, more federal money for public broadcasting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Mr. Mr. Rusher, you have 1 minute also.
If you don't think it's worth it to hear me, vote no. Public broadcasting has served a very useful purpose in this country in these early years when commercial television has been limited to a relatively few channels and public taste was just developing. But we have learned tonight that we are on the threshold of a brand new era in which technology will be able to provide each of us, through cassettes, cable TV, pay TV, and much else, with any kind of television we want at a price legitimately related to its cost. We have learned, moreover, that public broadcasting, as we know it today, isn't even all that public, that large chunks of it are comfortably in private hands, earning its executives very nice salaries without the inconvenience of having to make any payments whatever to stockholders. This is the enterprise that now comes to you and demands 4.5 times the taxpayer support it has hitherto had, more than $500 million a year, to aggrandize and perpetuate itself into a future that will not need it. Ladies and gentlemen, stand up not for your privileges and pleasures, but for your principles. Vote no.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And now we turn to you and our audience. You're all viewers of public television this evening. You're also taxpayers. And we ask you to tell us how you feel. What do you think? Should Congress substantially increase federal funding for public broadcasting? Send us your yes or no vote on a postcard with your comments to the Advocates, Box 1979, Boston 02134. On March 11th, the Advocates debated the question, should Congress deregulate trucking? Our audience responded this way: 4%. 4% said yes and 96% said no. On the other hand, it appears from our mail that there was an organized writing campaign which has something to do with that 96% which said no. And now we hope you'll join us next week for another important and exciting debate. Our thanks to Mr. Fisher, Mr. Rusher, their distinguished witnesses, and to our hosts, the Kennedy School of Government here at Harvard University. Thank you very much, and good night.
If you would like a written copy of tonight's debate, send $2 to Transcript, Post Office Box 1979, Boston 02134.
This program was produced by WGBH-TV, which is solely responsible for its content, and was made possible by grants from the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation and Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith, Incorporated.
The Advocates is produced with the cooperation of the Institute of Politics of the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University.